I'm gonna have Public Enemy's Fight the Power stuck in my head all day. What's going on, you guys? James here with another Real Rewind, where I go back and watch classic films for the first time ever. And today we're talking all about Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing, the 1989 masterpiece. Yes, I'm dropping that adjective because this movie is a masterpiece. Now, before we dive into that, if you are unfamiliar with Real James and it's your first time here at the channel, you guys, I talk about movies, TV shows, I review them, I react to them, and I just love talking with you. So if you like what you hear and what you see, go ahead and hit the big red button below and consider subscribing to the channel. Tap on that bell so you don't miss out on anything new. Also, go ahead and smash that like button because it does a ton for the channel, and comment below and let me know in Do the Right Thing which moment was your favorite. Also, it's okay to mention which moment was the most emotional for you, because yeah, I was pretty much silent for the last 45 minutes of this movie. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and set the stage here. Yes, this movie is directed and written by Spike Lee, and in 1989, of course, there were still so much tensions between different neighboring communities, especially in Brooklyn and New York City in general, but in Brooklyn, this little neighborhood is where we find this story. We're following our main character, Mookie, who is played by Spike Lee. He's a pizza delivery boy for a local pizzeria named Sal's, owned by, well, Sal, played by Aiello, and wow, he gives an amazing performance, but we'll definitely talk about that. Now, Sal's two sons, Pino and Vito, I don't know why Italians get so lazy with their names sometimes, I swear. Now, they're both basically yin and yang, because Vito is definitely cool with Mookie and the entire Black, Hispanic, and Asian community, but then you have Pino, who is, well, the man is, let's just say he's not very fond of Mookie. But what's great about Do the Right Thing is it's basically just a snapshot of this neighborhood in Brooklyn and how the different communities really react and interact with one another. So this is where we find Do the Right Thing, and I am going to spoil some things moving forward, so if you haven't seen this film, please go and watch it and then come back and finish the rest of this review, because when I tell you this is a masterpiece and my favorite Spike Lee movie up to this point, I'm not lying to you guys. Now, I've been on this Spike Lee binge recently. I've watched He Got Game, which is good, not great, but then I watched She's Gotta Have It, and that is like poetry in motion. However, Do the Right Thing is pretty much exactly what I thought it was going to be in terms of excellence, and even more. It is very heavy. It's definitely going to be triggering for some people, but the one word that kept coming to my mind as I'm watching this film is timely. And the reason it's so timely is because one of our characters here, he's not a main character, but he plays a very important part in the third act of the film. Radio Raheem, played by Bill Nunn, is strangled to death by police during an unjust, I want to say, arrest. They probably shouldn't have done any of what they did. Actually, they shouldn't have done anything like that. But it is so similar to what we're experiencing here in the United States, with George Floyd unfortunately being strangled to death as well. And it is so sad. It's incredibly heavy on my heart still, and this is one of those films that doesn't hold back, and I'm glad that Spike Lee didn't hold back. And that's basically where we're going to start for the positives in this film. So the dialogue here is just so effective. It's snappy when it needs to be, and it spends time and lingers when it has to. I felt like Spike Lee didn't actually waste any moment with each character, and there was a sense of development within each of our cast. And what I love so much is that there was a relationship that I was kind of building with each character, and it made the scenes that kind of stayed put for a while, because there were moments where you just felt like trapped in a good way for moments and moments and moments at a time, and you didn't actually escape until you kind of resolved whatever they were going through. For example, Giancarlo Esposito plays Buggin' Out. He completely disappears in that role, and a neighbor kind of scuffs his Jordans, and I've seen this scene I think maybe a few years ago, but I don't remember exactly what the outcome was. And what's great is that the moment lasted about 10 minutes or so, maybe even a little bit less, but it felt like Spike Lee gave enough time to really continue to develop Buggin' Out as a character. Also, it gave a sense of authenticity to the script in a way that I didn't think Spike Lee could have pulled off, because this was already like, what, an hour into the film, maybe a little bit less, and I figured, okay, we've seen the peak of what Spike Lee's gonna do with Do the Right Thing, but this movie continued to surprise me in the best way possible. Now, sometimes the dialogue here in the script itself cuts a little deep, and when I say that, okay, let me give some context here. See, I'm half Italian, so I come from a family that unfortunately, I've heard these sorts of racial slurs that Sal and his sons use in the pizzeria, and it's disappointing. But I think what Spike Lee does here is kind of give you the real approach to exactly how New York City was, and unfortunately probably still is in a sense. I think that, of course, we've gotten stronger in terms of raising our voices and saying no to those slurs, but when you hear it in this movie, it has this weight and this impact to it, and you can tell Spike Lee wasn't trying to kind of beat around the bush. He was giving it to you with no nonsense, and that approach is just what makes this movie so great. Now, I'm sure there are many ways to look at Do the Right Thing, but in my head I was breaking this down in 3 acts, and each act holds such an importance. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I have no negatives on my notes for this movie, but what I will tell you is that sometimes the movie felt like it was sluggish in the middle. However, I spent some time, I digested this movie, and it was worth it. So let's break down the 3 acts. In the first act, you kind of get introduced to this neighborhood in Brooklyn. Again, it's a slice of life in Brooklyn, and you get introduced to everyone. Mookie, his sister. You get introduced to Samuel L. Jackson's character. He's a radio DJ. Mr. Senor Love Daddy, I think his name is. Oh my gosh, it is unreal. His performance is so great, even though you don't see him most of the time. I think us getting introduced to those characters so early on helped the latter parts of the film, so we were able to really just continue to build that connection with these on-screen characters. And honestly, it does introduce you as well to the climate of the 80s, the late 80s that is, and some moments brought levity, and there were also some moments that were a total contrast and you felt like upset, like you kind of felt helpless as an audience member. Now, there is this moment early on in the film with the fire hydrant, and they I think what they do is they break, or they turn on the fire hydrant, and a ton of water shoots out, and I think it's really, really neat that Spike Lee has this moment there. But of course, Frank Vincent, a legendary actor, comes through with his convertible and says, "You better not soak my car." And then when the kids soak his car with water, there's a police interaction shortly afterwards, and Frank Vincent is trying to describe exactly what happened. However, this is a very early snapshot of how a lot of these interactions with police will go, and it is so sad that some of this stuff still happens today. And then moving into the second act of the movie, there's a lot of build up here. You can tell there is a ton of tension that is being built up between the Italian American community, the Black community, and then the Asian community, and then the Hispanic community. You can understand that things are starting to erupt, but you don't know where the story is exactly going because you're still getting to know exactly what's going on. And yes, sometimes it is an incredibly monologue heavy movie, and there are conversations that are just one-on-one, but when you get to understand what Spike Lee is doing by painting a picture of how life really is for these residents here in Brooklyn, you get to understand why we're spending so much time in this second act. I know I mentioned it was sluggish, and sometimes I felt like, man, we're really spending a lot of time here and there's still an hour left of the film. But what's really great is that it paid off, because in the third act, this is the culmination of all of those frustrations and tensions. Every conversation that we were not forced to listen to, but basically present for, it paid off, sometimes in a bad way and sometimes in a good way. Yeah, there's that really tragic moment at the end of the film, like I said, that makes this movie timely even in 2020, which is Radio Raheem getting his radio destroyed by Sal. There's a big, I guess, war of words, and then there's an actual, war because they're fighting each other, and then there's Radio Raheem getting choked out by police. And the reason that scene is just so poignant is because Spike Lee focuses a heavy deal on Radio Raheem getting choked out. The camera gets really close, and you start to feel almost trapped yourself, and it is a solemn moment. And from that point on, I mean, I just had a hard time keeping my head up. I was just kind of hanging it, and I kept thinking, like, how are we still in this time, even though this is a film back in the late, I should say, 80s. And what's crazy is that after the film, I saw this review on IMDb where someone said they were disappointed in the film. Okay, maybe this isn't for everybody, But then they said it's because of a riot starting over a radio that was broken. Now, if you think that the riot and all of that happened at the end of the film because of a radio being broken, I think you miss the point. The radio in this movie represents an entire culture, it represents a movement, and also a lot of the tensions that are building up between the Italian American community and the Black community. There are so many different bits of symbolism and imagery in this movie that Spike Lee plays with, and I think that it builds up to a perfect ending. Now, I'm not going to lie to you, it's not a happy ending, but what's good about this film, what's great even about this movie, is that it's not supposed to be happy and it's not going to sugarcoat anything for you. Now, outside of all of that, the reason why Do the Right Thing is really such an amazing film is the ensemble cast that we're introduced to. I mean, I'm going to read off some names on this list. You have Spike Lee, of course, as Mookie, Danny Aiello as Sal, Ossie Davis as De Mayor, John Turturro as Pino, Giancarlo Esposito as Buggin' Out. I just mentioned him, but dang it does he disappear in this movie. We know him, or most know him, especially my generation, as a Breaking Bad legend. The man is amazing. Now, in this movie, you could hardly recognize him. Now, of course, when I found out who he was playing, I focused on him quite heavily, but man, he disappears in this role. It's amazing. Bill Nunn as Radio Raheem is really, really good. He's silent for most of the film, but when he speaks, you are forced to listen because of how strong his line delivery is. Rosie Perez's debut as Tina, I thought this was a great performance by Rosie Perez. She is just such an amazing and versatile actor, and I love that this was her debut role, because if you didn't tell me that it was her debut role, I would have thought she was acting for years prior to this in film. Of course, I mentioned Sam Jackson as the best supporting actor in this movie, and the list just continues to go on and on and on. I mean, I just keep looking at this cast and crew, and I'm just so stunned at how Spike Lee was able to bring everyone together and give everyone their fair share of screen time. So if you had to ask me who my favorite was on this list, now, trust me, everyone is really, really good, and it's tough to pick one, but I think the most complete performance, my favorite performance, is Ossie Davis as De Mayor. It's because the movie really introduces you to De Mayor as someone who is just looking for a quick job so he can go make a buck across the street and buy a Miller Lite. Now, that seems to be the crux of his character in the beginning. Everyone thinks he's a drunk and everyone thinks he's just talking nonsense. But if you listen to everything he's saying, he's making a lot of sense. I mean, even in the beginning of the movie, De Mayor tells Mookie always do the right thing. And I think it's pretty great because Mookie's getting a lot of advice from everybody, and his actions in the third act are basically, well, him either listening or not listening to everyone's advice. And I don't know, De Mayor and Ruby Dee together, I mean, Ruby Dee plays Mother's sister, I should say, and man, I don't know what it is, but I feel like the way Spike Lee fleshed out their friendship and their relationship was just, it was near perfect, man. And as much as I really despise the character of Sal, because at the end of the film, he just made me so angry. Danny Aiello, if I'm mispronouncing that, guys, let me know in the comments below. But Danny plays an amazing character. He even got nominated, if I'm not mistaken, that year for the Academy Awards because his performance is just so real, and I think that's what it is. It almost felt like he wasn't even acting in some moments where it was just him being himself. But hey, I mean, the film is just full of beautiful performances, and it's really why the movie meshes together so well. And sometimes I really like what Spike Lee does in the sense that he goes from stoop to stoop to stoop, and we get different bits of the community, and we're learning a lot. Like the three gentlemen that are sitting with the red painted bricks in the background. Then you have the Hispanic community that has the little boombox showdown with Radio Raheem. And then you have, of course, the Black community where they're just having a good time, man. And sometimes, yes, these communities feud with one another, but there is a nice moment at the end where they all band together against racism, and I think that's pretty enlightening. Now, I'm a sucker for cinematography in movies, and here was some of the best cinematography I've ever seen because each frame held importance. And I also loved how cinematographer, let me get his name really quickly so I don't muddle that, Ernest R. Dickerson, what he does is allow things in the background to affect basically what you're seeing in the foreground, because when you're hearing conversations go on, and then you start to see some characters react in the background, you almost feel like everything is alive, that no frame goes wasted. And also, it's really cool what he does here, where there's a moment where, of course, you're seeing two people talk and it's kind of far away, and then the camera slowly gets closer and closer and closer to faces. And then sometimes when conversations get really intense, you feel like you kind of can't escape from the screen you're viewing this movie on, because it's just you having to focus on every single word that the character's speaking, thanks to the cinematography going directly in and the camera just kind of sitting there, so you're hyper focused on every single verb, noun, adjective that these characters are spitting out. One of my favorite bits of cinematography in this movie, honestly it's probably one of the best scenes in the film, is when the mayor is speaking to Mother Sister, and Mother Sister starts to recognize that the mayor is a sweet guy and he's doing sweet things for her and he has really good intentions. So when finally the mayor gets a response from Mother Sister and they're actually having a genuine conversation, there's a light post behind the mayor that flicks on immediately when he realizes, oh my gosh, she's having a genuine conversation with me. Man, that was such a powerful moment in the movie, because at that point is when I knew that this film was going to be one of the best movies that I've ever seen. So you're probably wondering, what the heck would I rate this on a 5-star system? It would go 5 out of 5 easily. It's one of the best movies that I've ever seen. It is my favorite Spike Lee movie up to this point, and it is such a beautiful way for me to get excited for Da 5 Bloods this Friday. It drops on Netflix. I'm so excited. Yes, Netflix, you guys are amazing, because I'm going to be able to get a chance to review this early for you guys and drop that review this week, so you guys can expect that at the channel. If you don't want to miss out on that or any other classics that I'm going to review, because guys, I'm going to need your help a little bit. What's the next movie I should watch for Real Rewind? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe if you haven't already, guys. We are almost at 2,000 subscribers because of you. I love this community. I'm grateful for you guys. And yeah, I just had so much fun sitting down with this movie. And then there were moments where I was really sad. But that's what a great movie does, is that it allows you to convey a ton of emotions in one sitting. And I'm excited to go back and revisit this movie again soon. I'm going to have to let it digest a little bit because it is a little heavy. But Do the Right Thing is definitely a 5 out of 5. Alrighty guys, well I have to go get ready for the next classic. Again, let me know in the comments below which one you want me to watch next. Until next time, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you at the next screening.